Everybody knows that once you hit level 85 Slayer, you finally have the chance to earn an Abyssal Whip from Abyssal Demons. It's a nice milestone for any account and one that a lot of people look forward to. Something that I personally didn't pay much attention to when I hit that milestone was the fact that a new boss opened up for me to kill. It wouldn't be until over a year later that I finally decided to try the Abyssal Sire for the first time. After all, that Abyssal Bludgeon is a nice chunk of change for the bank. In this guide, I want to go over everything you need to know about killing the Abyssal Sire, and also talk about some pros and cons for alternative strategies when killing him. There is going to be a lot to cover in this one, so I'll throw some timestamps on screen for you guys now, and we can dive right into the video. I believe the first thing we need to go over is what kind of level recommendations we're looking at for killing the Sire. Melee will be our primary combat style, but range and magic are also necessary. While we're on the topic of magic, you'll need to have the quest Desert Treasure completed to use the Ancient Spellbook. I would highly recommend having at least level 88 magic to cast the spell Shadow Barrage. I'll go over why exactly a little bit later. I do want to say it's possible to get by with 76 magic, but it's going to be a lot more annoying. And if you go the extra mile to get to level 92 magic for Blood Barrage, then that will help a lot during the fight. Beyond that, the only level you absolutely need is level 85 Slayer. There's also going to be a few other levels that can indirectly help you in the fight, most notably level 90 Construction. Because the Sire is quickly reached from a fairy ring, if you have a rejuvenation pool and a fairy ring in your house, you can save a lot of money on supplies by teleporting to your house in between kills. Now I don't want you to be off-put by this because it's definitely not a requirement. I personally don't use the house portal method, but I'll go over the pros and cons of it later. Next up, we're going to have to spend some time talking about gear. This is my recommended setup for first timers. Most of our damage is going to be dealt with melee, so I only bring a few pieces of range to switch into when we need it. You're definitely able to take more offensive items if you're a higher level or just more confident. I'll leave a link to the strategy wiki down below so that you can look at additional options if you wanted. Most of our gear choices are fairly straightforward, the only exception really being our weapon. Because the Abyssal Sire is a demon, Arclight is going to be the best weapon to bring besides the scythe. It is 100% worth unlocking this weapon for the boss. Looking at spec weapons, the Dragon Warhammer would be the best, with Dragon Claws being right behind it. If you can't afford either of these options, then Arclight has a great special attack you can utilize. If all else fails, then a Dragon Dagger is always a nice budget pick. Our inventory is just as important to talk about, but it can vary quite drastically depending on which method you're using when you kill the Sire. To make it simple, I'll show the inventory I usually bring and then later talk about how this inventory might change depending on the methods you use during the fight. As a first timer, you'll want to bring more food and less potions. As you get more familiar, you can actually get away with bringing no food at all. What you will need no matter what are combat boosters, an antidote ++, a rune pouch, runes to cast Blood Barrage and Smoke Barrage, a Draymond or Lunar Staff, and house teleports. The Sire has a lot of downtime during the fight, so I don't recommend using Divine Potions. Also, I like to bring one anglerfish with me to eat right before my first kill starts. Your inventory can fill up very fast at the beginning, and I just like to have one spot open at the start. Trust me, it makes it easier. Now that we have our gear and inventory ready, we can talk about some setup before we begin. As I mentioned earlier, the Sire can only be reached through fairy rings. Once you find yourself in the Abyss, there are 4 rooms per world to kill the Sire in. At the beginning of each hallway, there's an eyeball you can peek with to make sure no one is already in a room that you want to head towards. When you do head towards the Sire, you'll see that he's dormant and nothing will attack you. I like to zoom out a bit in my client, and I also set up my quick prayers to protect from melee, preserve, and piety. The fight starts with range, so I'll eat my anglerfish and swap into range gear. At this point, we're actually able to start the encounter. To begin the fight, you can directly cast Smoke Barrage on the Sire. This spell will immediately disorient him 100% of the time for 30 seconds. If you used a different smoke spell, then your cast will have less of a chance to stun him. You'll also notice there are a few tentacles around the room. If you get close to one while they're awake, they can melee you for up to 30 damage. As long as the Sire is stunned, they're going to be stunned too. Just beyond some of these tentacles, there are respiratory systems, 4 in total. You will have to kill all 4 of them to progress in the fight. Typically, one Shadow Barrage cast gives you enough time to kill 2 of the respiratory systems. This part is fairly straightforward. You'll use your ranging potion, turn on Rigor, and occasionally use the stamina potion. It's really as simple as cast Shadow Barrage, kill 2 of the systems, cast Shadow Barrage again, and kill the remaining 2 systems. If you're using Runelight, you can see the Sire stun timer in the top left corner. If you're not on a client, then you'll notice the tentacles will start to open up their eyes and become erect again as soon as the stun runs out. What you want to try and do is barrage the Sire before the stun runs up so they don't even have a chance of damaging you. After the 4 respiratory systems are dead, the next phase of the fight will start. At this point in the fight, you'll be directly attacking the Sire, so you'll want to switch into your melee gear. It's going to take a moment for him to become attackable, so you have some time to get your spec ready, sip a super combat potion, sip an antidote, and turn on your quick prayers. During this phase, the Sire has a few abilities we need to go over. He can use any of these abilities for any of his melee attacks, so you'll have to be vigilant. First off, he can summon a spawn that will drop nearby on the ground. You'll want to kill this spawn as soon as possible. Typically it only takes a hit or 2. If it's alive for 12 seconds, then it's gonna evolve into a more powerful Scion that's just more annoying to kill and deals more damage. The Sire also has the chance to summon a poison pool beneath your feet. This pool does rapid damage over time, even with an antidote sipped. You want to move away at least 2 squares to avoid all the damage, but if you're at least 1 square away, it won't deal quite as much damage. The last ability he can use is unavoidable. He can occasionally use a whip attack that can hit up to 26 damage through prayer. He'll telegraph the move by swinging both of his tendrils. You just kinda hope this one doesn't happen. To begin this phase, I use a single Dragon Warhammer spec and walk under him and switch back into Arclight. A strategy a lot of players like to employ is attacking twice and then walking under him. Because the Sire attacks very slowly, you can ensure that you're hit as few times as possible by doing this. It may not make a huge difference per fight, but over the course of an entire task it can help extend trips and save supplies. You do this all the way until the Sire hits 50% health. At this point, phase 3 will begin. At the start of this phase, the Sire will walk into the middle of the room and plant that juicy booty on the ground. What we want to do is make our way in front of him, standing on one of the tiles highlighted, and switch to protect from range. A few things are going to happen at this point. First, the Sire will begin to summon a lot of spawns. He will continue to do this until he's dead, so there's no point in killing them. This is the reason we switch to protect from range. Also, the tentacles will wake up and attack you if you get too close. As long as you don't go past either of the highlighted tiles, then you won't get whipped by them. Lastly, the Sire will continuously summon a poison pool beneath your feet every few game ticks. This is the main reason I highlighted the tiles in front of him. As soon as you see a pool under you, you'll want to run over to the opposite tile. Typically, you can get 1 attack in per poison pool, but occasionally you can sneak in 2 sword swings. You'll continue this attack move cycle until the Sire reaches 139 hit points. As the Sire drops below the HP threshold, he'll teleport you in front of him. You want to back away as quickly as possible. His chest will open up in an explosion, and if you're anywhere nearby you can take an absurd amount of damage. The animation doesn't last long, and once you see the purple portal pop out of him, you're good to run back in and attack. At the same time, the Sire will summon even more spawns and continue his poison pools. There is a slight difference though. After you teleport, the Sire will use the poison pool just 3 more times and then stop using it for a little bit. I know the poison pools in phase 3 are the bane of a lot of players, myself included, so I'll talk about them more specifically in the pro tips section of this video. At this point in the fight you might have taken some damage. Even through prayer the minions can hit you for 15 damage. This is where Blood Barrage comes in. Because the minions are so numerous, and weak to magic, you can easily heal yourself to full with a few casts. I usually heal myself without making any real adjustments, but there is a safe spot to cast from if you run down a little bit to the southeast. Just be careful to not be hit by the tentacles on the way back up. During this last part is when you'd want to use your spec energy if you didn't bring a weapon that reduces stats. Beyond all of that, this last part is a race to kill the Sire before the minions overwhelm you. I find this last part to be the least enjoyable because you can do everything right but still end up hitting 5 zeros in a row and then just getting zerged down by minions, which forces you to heal a lot. Those Blood Barrage casts aren't cheap, remember. But that is essentially the basics for this encounter. If you want to stick around, I'll now be going over some alternative methods, pro tips, and loot. I just wanted to mention that I'll leave an unlisted video of a full Sire kill linked down below, if you wanted to watch a whole unedited fight, and that I have a whole playlist of boss guides if you want to check out any of my other ones. Let's start off with something relatively simple. During phase 1, you're actually able to use magic instead of range to kill the respiratory systems. Range is the go-to option because it's cheaper, but if you don't have a high range level, the magic will allow you to still get some kills. On the more involved side of things, a crystal bow can be used instead of a blowpipe during phase 1. Using a crystal bow can cost less money per shot and also helps save supplies. This is because you have to run less, and it's much easier to flick rigor with. When I take a crystal bow, I bring one less stamina potion and one more prayer potion compared to without one. There are some downsides to this method. First off, you need to know what tiles to stand on. I begin on this tile to attack the first respiratory system, and as soon as I kill it, I can click directly on the southern one to be pulled over efficiently. I do the same thing on the other side. Attack from the highlighted tile, and then directly click on the southern system to be pulled over. What I've noticed with the crystal bow is that it does take a little longer on average to kill the respiratory systems. There also has been more than a handful of times that I needed to cast an additional shadow barrage to keep the Sire stunned, so it's just something to keep in mind. Next up, we can talk about the POH method. As mentioned earlier, the Sire is located right outside of a fairy ring, and you can quickly reach him from your house if you have a fairy ring inside it. Because of this, it's completely viable to teleport out after every kill, hit your rejuvenation pool, and run back in for the next fight. The Sire is normally a costly task, but this method can save you a ton of money on supplies. On top of that, using a rejuvenation pool allows you to use double specs every single kill, which is just some good fun on top of making it more efficient. My inventory might look a little something like this. You can almost completely cut prayer potions out of the equation, and food is basically a non-factor. With the extra space, you could even bring some more spec gear to swap into for a better chance to hit with the Dragon Warhammer. The main drawback to this is that it takes a little bit longer to start each kill and your total task time will go up. Your boss room might also be taken over when you're gone as well. For players looking to ball on a budget, this is definitely the move. On a quick side note, you can basically do the same thing if you have a desert amulet for Nar to teleport. The last alternative method I can think of is using a twisted bow to kill the Sire instead of melee. I assume most players can't afford this, myself included, but it's the same as melee mechanically. I just have a few pieces of knowledge I'd like to share with you guys before we make it to the end of the video. When you first start the encounter, you can directly cast a Shadow Barrage on the Sire to wake him up and stun him. The animation for this takes a few seconds. If you hit with a range attack first and then cast a barrage, you can skip the wake up animation completely. Also, during phase 1, I've noticed that on occasion when I cast a Shadow Barrage to re-stun the Sire, the cast will go off but nothing will actually happen. This is probably just a weird timing issue before he wakes up. Can't really fix it, it's just something to be aware of. The main thing I wanted to focus on in this section are the poison pools during the very last part. I mentioned this earlier that after you're teleported by the Sire, he'll use 3 more poison pools, and then sometime after that they'll show up randomly. As I fought the Sire, I noticed that random poison pools would come up and I wasn't exactly sure why. I was getting more than frustrated by this. As it turns out, there are 2 reasons for this. As stated on the wiki, like the previous stage, the Sire will use poisonous fume attacks, but only when the minion cap has not been reached. If any minions are killed, this attack resumes until the cap is hit again. There is a minimum of 3 fume attacks at the start of the stage. What this means is that if there are not 15 minions alive, then the Sire will continue using poison pools until they've all respawned. Using Blood Barrage can kill some minions, which will cause another pool to be summoned. On top of that, if the Sire is hit with a magic attack during this phase, he will summon a poison pool regardless of the minion count. The main takeaway from all of this is that after you cast a Blood Barrage during this phase, there's a chance a poison pool will be summoned under you. We have finally passed up all the technical info, and we can talk about some of the fun stuff. The Sire is a pretty profitable boss, even without getting a unique. The loot pretty much speaks for itself. The only thing I want to mention is that if you get an Unsire drop, you take it to the font in the middle of the Abyss area to have a chance at getting those big drops. Well, that certainly was a long guide. I felt like it was all pretty necessary to go over though. I had a lot of questions when I was first doing the Sire, and it was just kinda hard to come across all the information in one place. Hopefully putting it all together here was helpful for some of you guys. If you guys did end up enjoying the video, a like or a sub really goes a long way to help out the channel, and it just makes me feel good about my life choices. I'm really hoping to make 2021 a good year for myself and for the channel. In my brief absence, I've thought of a lot of video ideas I want to give a shot. We might actually be branching out from guides. I will be back in a week or two with the next video, so I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.